Hello and greetings. I created this video because I wanted to share with all of you train layout I'm currently working on. It's N scale, 3 feet 6 inches by 7 foot on a table layout. What's unusual, it is built entirely on a base of the extruded form insulation sheets. And I created a large block of foam and then I carved the world away, creating the layout. I had to went into this because I had two layouts previously and they got destroyed in kind of a home disaster. I'd boxed up all the rolling stock and stuff I had, and then when I retired, I opened the boxes and I said, well, I'm going to have to sell this stuff. And my wife suggested, yeah, you're retired. Why don't you start playing with it again? So I wanted to create a new layout. And as watching videos, and I have to say, this is a thank you to somebody called the Big 61 who created a 10-part series on using this type of foam in order to do model railroads and the terrain around it. And I was just so fascinated by it, and I loved the results so much that I decided to use it as a base of what I wanted to do. So to that end, I am a Colorado file. So the inspiration was the Denver South Park and Pacific and Colorado Southern, even though it's not narrow gauge, it's standard gauge track. But the idea of building it on foam was important. Now, why did I use the foam approach? Well, first of all, it's extremely light overall weight. My second layout, when they had to take it out to throw it in the dumpster, took 6 guys to haul it out between the hydrocal, the plaster, the woodworking boards, and everything else. Landscaping becomes the base of what you do. The videos I saw, I just was amazed with the results. And it really turned out to be easy to work with, and I wanted something fast that I could also play with overall. And so to that end, I did have to go to KATO Unitrack. Before that, I always did the cork beds and the laying of the track and nailing them. But I kind of been there, done that, and I really didn't want to do it again. And I started looking at the cost. There wasn't that dramatically a different price. But also the KATO track gave me a firm road bed, which kind of made up for some of the problems I was going to have with the foam. Now, I can't stress enough how important using computer layout software was to this project. And I made sure that it had the KATO Unitrack as part of it so the pieces would work. I needed elevations of the track to handle the grades, and it provided those track grades. The most beautiful thing was I could print a one-for-one template that I could lay on top of my train set and use it for the track layouts and the elevations and the contouring. And so all in all, it worked real well for me from that point of view. Basically, again, this was all done on a foam block. I'm going to show you how I built that in a sec. The one-for-one template made this a breeze, and basically I carved away the terrain after the railroad trestles. So first I had to build this huge foam block. I actually planned for it to be bigger, but after a while I realized it didn't have to be as big. I'd have so much scrap and salvage I could make the rest of it. So basically a 2-inch piece became my base, another 2-inch piece, followed by a 3/4-inch piece, followed by another 2-inch piece, followed by another 3/4-inch piece. And then at that point I stopped building the foam base and I kind of used wires. I attached them together, attached the corners so that they would be together. Then came the miracle of using the carving tools. And this is the set of carving tools I use for carving foam. Make sure you got good ventilation when you do it. But these made the job an absolute breeze. So what I did is I laid my 1x1 printed out and taped together template on top of each layer, and layer by layer I carved the contour away, which gave me a lot of scrap and salvage, which I'll tell you about how I used later. So layer by layer I put the template on, figure out where the contouring needed to be, and I cut then each sheet and set it to the side until I got to the bottom piece. So the bottom piece was the only piece actually glued on the board. Nothing was glued initially. But here you can see the gluing process for level 1, which every heavy thing I could find in the shop I used to hold it down. I just used a standard foam glue at that point. You do see track, but none of this track at this point is attached. Everything I did, I always laid the track out to the templates. I wanted to make sure the clearances were there, made sure that basically it worked well. Now you're at a point where the track that was going to be running underground, a double track in a tunnel, was going to basically get glued down. So again, I wanted to make sure the clearances were there, made sure that worked, because this was about to get covered by layer 2. So the other neat thing is I could paint it like a dark tunnel. So it got painted throughout. And it was important to finish this area because when the next layer goes on, it's going to get glued down. You won't have access to it. So at this point now we add layer 2, which you'll notice right off the bat, I keep laying the track down, but this is not glued down. On the boards are marked from the 1-for-1 template. I used pins to poke through, and then I could draw the lines, and I knew where the grades were. But what you see here is the track laid out to make sure it works, but there are no grades cut. There's nothing cut per se to allow the track to go up and down, and we'll show you a little bit more about how that happened later. So at this point, level 2 is in place. I'm looking at the fact that seems to work. This is a coat hanger wire. It was my original intent of how to control the grade cutting using a special tool. I used the wire and I formed it into this form so that I could do that. This is the one actually that's version 2 because I had to do something different. The problem with the wire would bend in the middle, and so it made the grade uneven and unnatural. So what I went to later was an aluminum bar, 2 aluminum bars, and I picked them because they were easily bendable to the grade, and I put wires in them so they'd hold in place. Then I used little wood blocks under the aluminum bars to simulate and make sure that the grade was proper and properly set up. And so this wound up being the preferred method, and you'll see how the cut worked later. But basically that tool rode on the metal bars. The 2 blue squares there show you where the bars would be. And so then all you had to do is lower it and move that tool along, and you would cut these troughs, which you see here where the channels are cut. And these are on test pieces. Nothing I did on the final layout wasn't at least tried 3 or 4 times on scrap foam because I had a crap load of it. But the problem you see here inherently is that you see all the little bumps that go along the way. No matter how hard you tried to make it a firm, straight cut, just could not get there. So that's something we had to deal with. And the answer for me was basically I needed a tool that would take these troughs and basically allow me to flatten it. So I created a flat bar, and I would heat it with a propane torch, and I would gradually move it along within the trough to level out the bottom. So here at this point, you're starting to see the foam being carved away into different things and into different methods. Here you're seeing the levels being added on top of that level where we were at. And this gives you a feel here where all the layers are in place in terms of how the layout worked. And yes, you can see tons of lines, and that was the big gripe everybody had. But all the rough carving, and I call this a rough carving, was done with these tools that made it go extremely fast. You're not looking to do fine work, you're looking just to take away block work. You're going to be doing the fine work a little bit later. So here you can see it going through, and where I carved things away. This was going to be a lake area. You're going to get a feel where you can see where the channels were cut using the methodology and the tool to bring those channels up. Again, you're going to see the track laid. The neat thing, by the way, about KATO Track, I didn't have to glue it down to test it and play with it. I only glued it down if it was going to be underground and I couldn't get to it. And so the track many times was taken off and put back on and taken off and put back on, and gave me a chance to try different things. So at this point now, and by the way, where that lake was, that originally was going to be a big mountain peak in the middle, and I just changed it on the fly. I didn't want another long tunnel, and I thought I could create something nice there, so that wound up being a lake that's kind of a volcanic caldera was my goal. And here you can see the back of it, and there's tunnel access for if you have a derailment or something happens within the tunnels that you can get to it. And here we're going to follow back up, and then I'm going to give you a close-up view, a little bit of one of the channels that were cut. So here you can see a little bit of how the channel was cut through. And then the cool thing is you just carve away from that. You leave the road bed in place, and then you carve away what you want your earth or landscape to be from that road bed. So the road beds become fixed, but they are foam based. I did look, by the way, at making it wood based. It made it a lot more complicated, and so I just opted not to. So here you can see, by the way, that one little tunnel you see there, that wound up going away. The software did not give me height clearances, and stuff sometimes would not fit through it, so that's one thing to be aware of. And here you can see I've used it all the way down to the baseboard in terms of giving us ways. Now, we smooth the track beds out. I used the tool I said to smooth them out. They still weren't necessarily smooth enough. I used a product from my daughter who works in theater. They use this on foam. It's called Jack Sand. A couple people I know I recommended it to said they looked at it and said it's really expensive, but I'm going to tell you it's worth it. It's better than using the putties or the other ways of hiding the lines and things like that. Why? Because I can load them into tubes like this. And I created three, a fine tube, a medium tube, and a broad tube, so that I could use it as kind of fill dirt. But be aware, it's a final product in terms of how it works. This is showing you the toolkit that I assembled to do all the carving work and then work on the train layout itself. I felt a little bit like a doctor sometimes when I was doing it, but it worked really well. But out of all these tools, there were three tools I used probably 70% of the time, and that's these three. They are clay carving tools, but they allowed me to carve dramatic features in cliffs. Allowed me to smooth things out. As rasps, they just worked really well. I kept my inspiration up on the wall by the train set, including pictures of cliffs that I'd taken pictures of. And like I said, everything I did before I did on the final layout, I tried out on a scrap piece of foam. This is a scrap piece of foam. My first attempt at carving cliffs and cliff features, and I'm looking at what it looks like with the railroad, what it looks like with the car, trying different types of undercoated paint. One thing I'll warn you about this process, it generates a lot of scrap foam, so I have a shop vacuum system, so I installed this hose that hangs over the train set so that I always have the ability to vacuum up the scrap and things like that as I kind of work through the layout. So at this point now, we're going to start detail carving using the tools I showed you earlier, and you're already seeing some changes in the blue foam. Again, you can still clearly see the lines where the foam go together, but again, nature has lines in it. So the way I did that, oh, by the way, here are boulders that are created from scrap pieces of foam that actually turned out looking really well. You'll see them in a creek bed a little bit later. Here are the washes. I work N scale, so I have this much smaller scale to deal with. These are actually perfume misters. I bought a box of 40 of them, and I'm glad I did because inevitably, no matter how I cleaned them, they did clog. But here you can see my washes, my alcohol, my scenic glue, all that in these little mister bottles. And when you watch the videos that I referred to, you'll see how those washes really pull the cliffs out and really begin to make them look natural. So here you can see the cliffs now after they've gone through final carving, and they also now have the base paint on them. I picked three colors of base paint. I picked ones for the mountains and the cliffs, ones for the kind of flat arid areas, and then one for the forested area. The green is the forested area. And just like in the videos, as you begin to use the washes, it just really pulls that detail out. I was really quite amazed. So here's what my layout looks like today. Half of it is kind of detail finished. The other half, I've got detail work still to do on it. But we're going to show you some different pictures of some different sections of it so you can see kind of how it turned out. Here is that one cliff area you kept seeing, and I dare you to find the original line from the foam. These pictures match Glenwood Canyon beautifully in terms of the lines and the strata that are there. This area is called the farm area. I dedicated it to my daughter and her husband, so it's called the Rogers Farm. And it just turned out really well. There's even an apple tree with apples on the back. There's a lot more detail I can show you. The next area is the mining town. And this is a town that has several mines built around it and people going to and from work. There's one cabin with a little old retired guy in front with a great view, which I kind of pretend sometimes is me. Here is the gold mine. I want you to pay attention to the cart. There's a huge gold nugget there that they found. For the gold, I, by the way, used crushed pyrite. I ordered it over the internet. It turned out great. The little stuff looks just like gold. And so this is the Crystal River Valley. There are three fishermen, so you can take a look and see if you can find them. But you can see the rapids and the pools that are in it, but also take a look at how it kind of merges into the cliffs and the foam. This is Crystal Lake. This is a deep, poor lake. It's about, I want to say about 1.25 inches, 1.5 inches deep in reality. The waterfalls turned out beautiful on the first try. This is a view of the resort area from overhead, and in there, if you look in the center, you'll see a hot tub. There's a little dining deck area, restaurant kind of place, and some cabins for rent, and they even put a siding, and there are hot springs in there. If you were in the center of the caldera and you were looking out towards the river over the dam, this is the view you would have looking down the valley. And I like the way, again, I love the way this foam stuff turned out. This is the coal mine, and here's an example. It's very forgiving. You need more space, you just cut the foam, use the same washes and paints, you can match it easily. I had to make that bigger. I had to make things a little bigger here for the mountain village that are there so that the huts would fly in. These are, by the way, Austrian or Swiss chalet huts that I modified to look like Western log cabins. This is the forest town. There are 308 trees that I sat and made overnight. Thank God for the armature that they sell. There's a graveyard in there, and that's going to be a huge lumber mill there. And this is a look at the tunnel that goes under that forested area, just to kind of give you a feel for, how the trees kind of came together. And again, this came because I have pictures mounted on the wall of what autumn looks like, and it helps you make it real. This is the main town. It has a lot of detail work still yet to go on it and a lot of weathering to do. But this is the largest siding I have on the layout, and it really worked out well. For those of you that do remote control, because I didn't, I did this old school. This is the control panel that I generated, and this is where it goes. The system supports 5 separate power packs. So you can run them 5 different trains individually and have people around the table. But the reason why you want remote and you didn't want to do it this way is this is what I spent 3 weeks on the back patio doing, is wiring that control panel. So we'll end that with the build, and now we're going to have a little fun and let you take a look at the trains as they're running on the layout. The most I've done on my own is 4 trains independently on 4 different power packs. But I like the fact that I can control them. The overall design layout, I wanted on this layout 3 independent loops so that I could just run trains in circles on 3 loops, which I never had before. And this did it well. And sometimes you hear people talk about a design flaw. Much to my chagrin, I wound up with a design enhancement. I didn't plan for it, but if I set the switches the right way, I can have one train travel on all the loops without changing any switches for the longest run, and it literally travels on all 3 loops. And the KATO Crosstrack, the cause of that accident, but I love it at this point. So here's the train basically going into the mountain village, and we'll probably see, I think it's a passenger train. No, that's a passenger train going into the mountain village. No, it's a passenger train coming on the main line down below too. It's a double siding in the town over on the other side of the station. And again, I can't tell you how much, I did hydrocal casting and plaster cloth on my second layout, which is one reason why I weighed a ton. But the look and what I got out of this, I just absolutely loved it. Mainly because I could mimic nature in my pictures probably a lot easier than with hydrocal casting. I mean, I have my own rubber casts. I made my own rock castings on the second layout. But this gives you a little bit of a feel for what it looks like when the train's running. We're going to shift here now to a different. This is going to be a run-by down in the village and the town. And you can see I did get some Denver South Park and Pacific and Colorado Southern stickers. I had them in storage. I don't even know if you can buy them anymore. But it's, it's part of what I'm trying to do. And yes, I gotta have a Zephyr train. But I rode them when I was young, and I'd love to ride them now. And so here's a couple run-bys. We changed the hotel into a Fred Harvey hotel, made little labels. I've got to attach them down a little bit better. Here's a union office going by an engine house. And now we're going to basically see a freight train kind of coming through, out of the tunnel, past the farm, over the Crystal River Bridge. And then basically into the town, although it's not going to halt at a siding. It could if I wanted to. And notice there's a train actually stopped up on the cliff up above on the other side. I still have a lot more detail work I want to put into these to make them more photorealistic. And then N scale's really, how can I put it? It's a tough one to play from making it look photorealistic at low levels. But again, I like the way this kind of all turned out. If you notice where the cliffs meet the board, it's not like a seam. And that gets back to using the jack sand. The jack sand wound up being, what the dirt that fell at the bottom of the cliffs, or it wound up being the way that I buried track a little bit. A little track work I got to do, but there always is track work in this here. This train here is going up the valley to the Crystal Resort Lake, and it will not stop there, hopefully. And it should pop out of the tunnel there as it makes its climb to the midway trestle into the mountain town. I have all the realistic problems. By the way, this grade is the steepest grade. I wound up shifting it to make that grade steep. This grade coming up on the other side is half the height, so it handles the longer trains better. Here's a train leaving the mountain or the forest village, going over the trestles. And here's the beautiful thing about foam. The original plan did not have this line. As I was building the layout, I could see there was another line potential. And so I went to the software, laid it out. Sure enough, it fit, it worked, and the grades cleared. And so here's a train leaving the mining town. And so basically, I even got a little more out of the layout, although they are terminal lines. The tunnel you saw there on the left, that's eventually, if I expand to a second table layout, that's the way I'm going to pass the trains through from one to the other. So the next run that you're going to see is going to be on the green loop. And this train again is going to wrap back around. And it will, again, make the climb up to the Crystal Lake Resort, but you're going to see it from a little higher vantage point here. The only downside of this is realistic. I'm happy with it, but the Crystal Lake is not something you readily see easily from the front of the layout. It's one of my best features so far, but it's kind of down in a pit, which it's supposed to be. I do make up stories about all this. The Crystal Lake actually has 2 hot springs in it. It has a hot spring right off the platform when you get off the train. There is a hot tub, if you go back and look at the pictures, where people are soaking in a hot springs hot tub. And so, much like my dad taught me, I'm trying to make stories about all these different things and that they mean different things. And as a credit to my dad, I've actually hidden a layout in one of his buildings in this layout. So that's it. I wanted to share it to you. I'm not going to put any more detail out there unless you guys ask for it. I just want to let you know what is possible just doing foam. I did learn lessons and I did make mistakes, but it turned out all right. Thank you. You have a good day. Take care. Bye-bye.